Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of just... where are we? Is anyone else asking themselves that lately? I find myself asking that at least a couple times a week anymore. Where the hell are we? What upside-down bad timeline has everything kind of gone to? I don't know. When I was in high school, people watching in malls was a big deal. That is not a thing. That's not a thing anymore for a lot of people. The malls are like a dead zone if they're even still up. A lot of them are just urban explorer wastelands, which are kind of interesting to look at, but it's also just kind of eerie and surreal. And so now, instead of people going to malls to buy things, people buy them online. But it's the complete opposite of what you see is what you get. Because what you see, you will be lucky if you get anything like that a lot of the time. There's an endless supply of horror stories about this out there, pictures that people put up of them buying something that when it arrives, it looks like a cheap piece of crap that's been mutated and only vaguely resembles the picture that the seller used to foist whatever the abomination is off on their unsuspecting buyers. And as human labor has been basically devalued across the entire planet, and the corporations have outsourced work to faraway lands to try and make a buck off cheap labor, quality has virtually disappeared from the vernacular in regard to a lot of the things we buy these days. You have the same corporations talking out the right side of their mouth every other 5 seconds about how green and sustainable the new future is going to be.
Nike New York headquarters, and we have Shauna Hanna here, who is the VP of Sustainable Innovation at Nike.
On behalf of the Walmart Sustainability team, welcome to our 2022 Sustainability Milestone Summit.
At Nestle, we're building a more sustainable future.
Sustainability is a journey that demands accountability. At PepsiCo, we have long embraced our responsibility to help build a more sustainable future.
Yeah, they're the same ones that are selling products that are destined for a garbage dump near you much sooner than ever before. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this. Have you noticed that the things that we're buying these days are falling apart way faster than they ever have in our lifetimes?
So have you all noticed that everything kind of sucks now? And I don't mean like the general state of the world. I mean like the stuff we buy is just like a little bit worse than it was 10 years ago.
Today I'm going to make a quick short video on all new things, all new products suck.
Overhyped, over-sponsored products that suck.
That's just life in most American homes. Walls are thin and the opposite of soundproof. And something always needs to be fixed. And most homes aren't even that old. There should be no excuse that they're falling apart. But why are they like this, especially when other areas have sturdy, thick houses that last hundreds and hundreds of years?
This is the problem right here. Shit ass Dodge. So Dodge makes these heater hoses out of plastic, and plastic breaks, it gets brittle, cracks, starts to leak.
Are they as reliable as the older generations? No. They're just not. They're all computer controlled. And the ones that had those Yamaha designed engines, they blew up.
So these apartments and everything in them are 8 years old. Well, you know, my dishwasher needs to just be replaced. The dryer he's worked on twice. The washer and dryer come with the apartment. I have a brand new washer because the transmission went out. The ice maker, he's repaired twice and finally just put a new ice maker in. I haven't told him yet, but one burner on my stove is starting to act up.
First the dishwasher, and then the fridge.
Where were these appliances from? Which manufacturer?
Samsung.
From useless shelves that won't hold any weight.
Our ice cream was like frosty and mushy.
To freezers that just don't keep things cold.
When it comes to new refrigerator problems, we thought we'd heard it all.
When the guy went out to the truck to get the handles, there were no handles on the truck.
David Bradford's brand new top-of-the-line Sears Kenmore Elite refrigerator was missing one of the most basic parts, the handles to open the doors.
Washing machines and dryers, they all suck. I have a 38-year-old washing machine and dryer, and yeah, I've had to change a couple parts like a water pump and have a time switch rebuilt. But, you know, other people I know have gone through 3 washing machines in 7 years.
Survey says most of us have had an appliance break down, nearly half of them between 5 and 10 years old. And get this, nearly 1 in 3 broke down after less than 5 years.
The truth is that appliances have gotten really bad over the years. I've been doing YouTube videos for about like 2.5 years. I've been doing appliance repair for 5 or 6. They are really bad. New machines are not built like old machines are, and unfortunately, they don't build them like they used to.
Everything new is made cheaper, crappier, and never lasts. Anytime you can keep your stuff going, keep your stuff going. From your cars, to your washing machine, to your fridge, to your furnace.
They're just not as reliable as the older ones. It's sort of like if you want the height of reliability, well-built, and they're going to last a really long time, basically you're talking the mid-90s to late 90s. Everything's going planned obsolescence. That's the world these days, you know. They sit around and say, why should we make a car that lasts 1,000,000 miles? Then we won't sell as many.
I mean, I was at the grocery store a few weeks ago looking at a new toaster. Since the one we bought only a few years ago now is already half dead and the little thingy won't go down and all that. And I ended up chatting with an elderly guy next to me who was there trying to buy a new coffee maker. And he just started telling me this story. I don't know, does this happen to you too, just by the way, that when you're out in public, random people come up to you and tell you stories? Happens to me a lot. And he just started telling me all about how he had this old coffee maker that lasted him 20 years. And it finally crapped out, and he bought a new one, and the new one only lasted 2 years being used the exact same way, and he couldn't believe it. And his takeaway was, you younger generations don't even realize how much cheap junk you're buying. That's what he said. And he's not wrong. You know, my best friend just bought her first house. And it's only 6 years old. Most people would consider that new in terms of houses. And she had the inspection. She did all the things you do in this society when you buy a house, which has got to be one of the most grueling and unnecessarily arduous processes that we go through. And they straight up told her that the HVAC units that they put on new home builds these days are cheap, inefficient pieces of crap that are designed to last not more than 5 to 10 years. So they told her when she was going to buy the house that within the next 4 years, she was going to have to replace this unit. And so she knew that going in. And she bought the place and she moved in. And it wasn't even that much later that that air conditioner did exactly that. It crapped completely out. And apparently for her house, to get a decent one that's not going to do that, you can either pay $14,000 or $17,900 to get a new one installed that's not going to be another piece of junk. That'll just have to be replaced again in another 5 to 10 years. And the company that's installing her new one actually straight told her that the majority of their business these days is just replacing cheap air conditioning units that have been installed on the new houses that are being built. So they're actually building houses now that you're going to have to replace things like the roof, even though it's supposedly a new house, the HVAC units, the appliances. I mean, that's not really what you think of when you think of buying a new house. But her telling me that story and them saying that to her is only the first person in the last couple weeks that has told me a similar thing. Because we had a home inspector here in our house because we're having a whole situation right now. I don't even want to get into it with you guys right now. I'm so frustrated with the things that are going on right now. But anyway, this guy was telling me the same thing. He was like, I would be very careful if you're considering buying a new house because they cut so many corners these days on houses. These are houses. This is like one of the most major purchases that anyone's going to make in their lifetimes for most people. And everything that's going into these houses, a lot of it is cheap crap that is just going to fall apart. In fact, my friend, before she bought her house, she was renting another house. And it was a brand new house when they moved in to rent it. The guy bought several houses and put them for rent. So she was the first person to ever live in there. It had all new appliances and everything. And right before her 1-year rental lease was up, the brand new, never before used until she moved in dishwasher broke 2 weeks after its 1-year warranty ran out. I mean, it's as if the thing lasted just long enough to make it through that year of warranty so that it could just die. And that's just during a normal year's use by 2 people. So it's not like it's being arduously used or anything. It's just being used by 2 people who live in a house like normal use. And the thing broke 2 weeks after its 1-year warranty ran out. I mean, that's the level, okay? And we've been living under planned obsolescence for, way more decades than I've been alive. So for those of you who don't know, planned obsolescence, according to Investopedia, can be summed up pretty easily as a calculated, strategic act of making sure that an existing product or the existing version of a product will become useless or outdated within a given time frame. It's basically artificially limiting the usefulness of something to ensure that a new one will be bought. And I've seen some people claiming that this was from the 70s, but planned obsolescence has actually been around for much longer than that. It used to be openly admitted that that's just how the economy was run. Newspaper articles in the late 50s and early 60s I came across are actually openly discussing the pros and cons of such a system and openly pointing out that people can't really get too upset about it because planned obsolescence is a good economic stimulant. And because people were starting to get angry once this became really widely known in the mid-50s and talked about, people started to get angry about it. It became part of a larger national discussion. And they were trying to discuss whether or not, is it fraud to do this? According to this article from 1961, they did a study of the leaders in marketing in this country by the advertising trade publication Printers Inc. And they were calling out the auto industry as being guilty of deliberately under-engineering products. They were accusing appliance manufacturers of doing this. They were also naming light bulb manufacturers, clothing manufacturers, toy makers. And this lady, Sylvia Porter, that wrote the article says, "I bet I'm touching on many a sensitive nerve among you here." This is the way they were talking back at that time. And people have been very critical of this, obviously, but she was saying, it's a very stimulating force for the economy, though. So she wrote another article in 1958 saying that this debate touches on the foundation of the American standard of living. And this one here is an editorial by her. And I just want to read you this particular quote out of this one from 1958 because I think it gets right to the point. They say, "Our whole economy is based on planned obsolescence, and everybody who can read without moving his lips should know it by now." So there's a little sarcasm for you. "We make good products, we induce people to buy them, and then next year we deliberately introduce something that will make those products old-fashioned, out of date, or obsolete." Which is still a little better. I mean, none of this is good, but at least this is saying, we try to make it seem like you need a better thing, not we're purposefully designing things to fail and be pieces of crap so you'll have no choice. But yeah, so they openly admitted back in the day that planned obsolescence was built into the economic engine of this country. It was how they were having such a great economic boom in the 50s. It was part of it. And even though it was not really a popularized, well-known term until the mid-1950s, planned obsolescence was actually first coined by Bernard London, an American real estate broker who wrote the seminal paper Ending the Depression Through Planned Obsolescence in 1932. in it, he proposed some pretty outrageous ways to fix the economy in the Great Depression. And I just want to read you a few excerpts of this because I just this is what people were talking about doing back in that time. Okay? He was calling for the government to assign a lease of life to products like shoes and homes and machines. All products of manufacture, mining, and agriculture, when they're first created, they would be sold and used within a certain term of their existence, which would be known by the consumer. And after the allotted time of life had expired, those things would be declared legally dead. And this would be controlled by a duly appointed governmental agency, which would have people turn these things in and destroy them under widespread unemployment. And so there would constantly be new products being made, pouring forth from factories and marketplaces to take the place of the obsolete. And the wheels of industry would be kept going and employment regularized and assured for the masses. So you would have to turn in your used, quote, legally dead, obsolete products to government agencies. And you would get a credit that you could then put towards a new thing, which would be like 10% of what you paid for it. But also, on the flip side of that, he was also proposing that if you were to continue to use your old legally dead product, your old clothes, your old car, whatever, and old buildings was part of this too.
The problems of our cities are real, however, because of the heavy hand of old-fashioned design. The elaborate pigeon roost we see here suggests that obsolescence stalks our apartment properties. Substantial and ornate buildings are to be found everywhere. Surely obsolescence should not cause despair. It is one of the results of America's rapid growth.
After they'd passed the official mandated obsolescence date, as determined by the time they were created, you would be taxed for continued use of what is legally, quote, dead. So that was a plan that they came up with. Just unfreaking believably short-sighted, ridiculous, wasteful, terrible plan. But anyway, he came up with it, but the idea actually came a few years earlier in 1929 when an American advertising executive named Ernest Elmo Calkins discussed what he called artificial obsolescence. So it's the same idea, you just use a different word, as a way to fix the problem, quote unquote, of manufacturing speed outstripping consumption, which was going on at that time. And his answer involved a new type of manufacturing, which is the manufacturing of a demand for products, something he referred to, and you really cannot make this up at all, consumer engineering. So instead of using a product until it broke or whatever, companies would basically engineer consumers, in layman's terms, manipulate people, into buying more stuff that they actually didn't need. And two of Calkins' employees wrote a book on this, and they called it Consumer Engineering, a New Technique for Prosperity. And here's a quote from that. Goods fall into two classes, those that we use, such as motor cars and safety razors, and those that we use up, such as toothpaste or soda biscuits. Consumer engineering must see to it that we use up the kind of goods we now merely use. And I just want to remind everyone that this is the same lovely time period that Edward Bernay's 1928 book Propaganda was published, wherein he essentially touted the belief that it was the social responsibility of a behind-the-scenes set of controllers running things to devise clever public relations campaigns to direct human herds into their appropriate corrals. Because, the masses are basically just, I guess, dumb cattle to be manipulated to the whims of whoever's running things, right? As Vance Packard notes in his book, The Wastemakers, by the 1950s, Americans were living under Eisenhower's idea of buying your way to prosperity. This is the idea. And planned obsolescence was just the engine that was running that post-war economy at the time. And if you wanted to sum that up with a quote or two, I think these would be it. So these are from Packard's book. In 1950, the chairman of Allied Stores Corporation, B. Earl Puckett, said that basic utility cannot be the foundation of a prosperous apparel industry. We must accelerate obsolescence. It is our job to make women unhappy with what they have. This manipulation of people includes the manipulation of time. People have to be made unhappy more quickly. So there's that. That's an F of a quote, ain't it? In 1955, marketing consultant Victor LeBeau said, quote, "Our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfactions, our ego satisfactions in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, worn out, replaced, and discarded at an ever-increasing rate." So this plan sounds really good, right? I mean, as you can imagine, all of this so-called prosperity-inducing consumerism just did wonders for the world's landfills. I mean, anyone else think it's kind of funny how the system literally spent decades psychologically manipulating millions of people into being unhappy, rabid, wanton consumers, into buying way more crap than they ever needed, and into discarding things well before they stopped being useful, only to at some point in the 1970s completely flip that script a la the Club of Rome to mankind being the enemy, and now it's everybody's fault that the environment sucks, and look at how much humans are just hurting the planet with their horrible, horrible consumerism. You terrible, terrible humans. It's not corporations manipulating people through planned obsolescence. No. It's the fact that you're buying anything. That's whose fault it is. I mean, it's really just conscience laundering, is what it is. But while that green guilt-washed propaganda message was busy making the rounds, this type of planned obsolescence only got more baked in with the rise of big tech companies whose entire business model appears to be built on it. I mean, how many of you out there right now listening remember buying a PC and getting it home only for it to go obsolete before you even get it out of the box and plug it into the wall? Right? Or people who need the latest phone, even though the version they have already works just fine, and the new one, which costs hundreds of dollars more, only has like a few new features on it, right?
On September 7th, 2022, Apple announced its latest product releases during its Far Out event. As expected, the iPhone 14 was headlining the new generation of products, spotting a fairly similar look and slightly upgraded specs to its iPhone 13 predecessor. Despite not offering much of an upgrade, people still queued and camped outside Apple stores all over the world, eager to spend a small fortune to get their hands on a product very similar to what they already own, only to watch it become dated same time next year. And this isn't unique to Apple. In fact, it's the reigning economic model used by most successful companies.
These aren't being made to be repaired, just replaced. We have landfills now that are just full of electronics. It's so bad, one can't help but wonder if the term upgrade is really just a Scooby-Doo villain mask that planned obsolescence likes to hide behind.
As soon as we clean him up, I'm sure you'll recognize him. There, look familiar?
Planned obsolescence.
Well, they sure had everything figured out.
Not to pick on Apple here, because you could do this with a lot of companies, but I'm going to use it as an example right now. The iPhone, that's just one example here, okay? Apple's been doing something with its phones now that's called serialization, or parts pairing. And what this means is, if you were to personally try to swap out a broken screen for your phone with another screen from a different phone just to fix it, the phone still won't actually work though. Not because of any technical reason, but simply because the serial numbers don't match. See what they did there? The only way to get the phone's new screen to actually work is to take the iPhone to a special Apple-authorized technician who can reassign the serial numbers that makes the repair work. So the phone itself has been made unable to recognize the new screen's serial number. So at this point, we're living in a world where just owning the right parts and putting them in the thing the right way doesn't allow the thing to actually work, because it has quite literally been artificially stopped from working. And a lot of times having one of these specially accredited technicians fix the thing can sometimes cost more than just buying a new thing, depending on what it is. which is why Apple has been accused of purposefully incentivizing people to throw their phones away and just buy new ones rather than fix them. And the way that these things are being built, and it's not just iPhones or smartphones, it's lots of products these days, the way some of these things are being built, they're not being built to facilitate repair. They're actually being built to wind up in a freaking landfill somewhere and just buy a new one. And it's so bad, in fact, that it was just announced that a French prosecutor is investigating Apple officially to see if the company is breaking France's new 2021 anti-waste law, which officially made serialization illegal in the country. And Apple, mind you, not admitting any guilt in any of these cases, so I just want to state that for the record. Apple has been ordered to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in fines at this point in recent years after lawsuits in multiple countries have been settled regarding the company's use of software updates to throttle the batteries in its older phones. So, I mean, this kind of thing has gotten so bad that there's a rising movement now called the right to repair. People are having to fight. They're actually having to fight for their right to be able to repair the things they buy. That's how stupid and utterly devoid of all common sense, whatever, everything has gotten in the 21st century in this regard. I mean, if you look up the right to repair movement, and there are lots of organizations that are having to fight for this right now, the right to repair movement includes such mind-blowing concepts as devices should be designed and manufactured in a way that actually allows people to repair them. I mean, amazing. What genius came up with that idea? Wow, why didn't we ever think of that in the entirety of modern human history? Another concept, that companies should not be allowed to use software specifically to hinder repairs of its products. That's a thing. That is a thing that they're fighting to stop. And these days, the cost of replacing a battery sometimes makes it cheaper to just buy a whole new thing with a new battery in it. It's incentivizing people to throw more crap away and buy more stuff. And of course, companies are making more money by this, but it's just filling up our landfills with more trash. It's just making the problems of the environment worse. The very problems that supposedly are all your fault for existing and totally not corporations' faults for the way that they're doing business, right? I mean, the same thing happens with things like prescription glasses and lenses. I wear glasses, and to put new updated lenses into a pair of frames I like costs way more than just buying a whole new pair of glasses. So why would people who are already getting crushed by inflation do that? Gee, it's kind of like the whole system is set up to make corporations more money by creating more pointless garbage than ever before, all while those same corporations lecture us all out their butts on how much they care about going green and sustainable development.
Well, I can tell by this tiny old-fashioned freezer that this refrigerator is probably about 10 years old.
So, throughout the 20th century, people en masse didn't just get manipulated into owning more things than they needed, but they didn't like it, because as soon as they owned something, corporations would make people think that whatever they had sucked, so they would buy the next new thing instead. In other words, the 20th century can be characterized by people owning everything and hating it. Today, however, as many of you know, that has flipped. We're being told now we're going to own nothing and we're going to like it. I mean, just on its face, owning nothing doesn't really seem to put us in a very good position in society, especially not with the way things are being run and the power dynamic and the wealth inequality. So the permanent renter liking it part is extremely dubious, I think, questionable. You know, shortages, inflation, and institutional investors like private equity firms investing billions of dollars in real estate market hasn't really helped matters much. They've already declared that the future of America is to be a nation of renters. So far, people are owning a lot more nothing here, and they're not liking it. And I keep hearing people ask, like, how is that going to be possible? How will it be possible that we'll shift to a society where people will own nothing, but they will actually like it? And my answer is, enter the subscription economy. What is meant by subscription economy is there's a trend that's happening, and it's been happening quietly in the background for some time now, that is basically a trend towards accessing an asset and away from the actual ownership of that asset. And for some things, it makes sense, like Netflix. You can't own Netflix, right? It makes sense that it's a subscription-based model, but the point that I'm making is this isn't even going to remotely stop with digital platforms where it actually does make sense. Take cars these days, for example, which are now being referred to as computers on wheels, the modern car. We've already seen things like Mercedes-Benz selling cars that can do all kinds of stuff, like the car can physically do the things. But you can't get the car to do the things unless you pay them an extra monthly fee on top of the purchase price of the car. Like the car can warm your butt, for example, but only if you're willing to pay a monthly fee that unlocks the butt warmer ability. So in other words, the company is offering a subscription service for features the vehicle is built with and already capable of. They're just locking those features behind yet another paywall in addition to what's already been paid for the car. And it's not just butt warmers either. So like this article from The Verge is talking about how they have a $1,200 annual subscription that improves performance by boosting output from the motors by 20 to 24%, increasing torque and shaving 0.8 to 0.9 seconds off of a 0 to 60 mile per hour acceleration. So you could pay extra for your car to go a little faster, which it can already do, but if you don't pay extra, it won't. This is not physical hardware upgrades. It simply is unlocking the capabilities, the full capabilities of the vehicle, which is openly indicating that Mercedes is intentionally limiting the performance of their cars so they can sell that extra performance later as an optional extra. And it's not just Mercedes, it's a lot of car companies that are doing this. Toyota has a thing now where people who have remote start, where they use their key fob to start their car remotely, like cool it off in the summer and stuff like that, or warm it up in the winter, it runs through a phone app. And so now they're going to start charging $8 a month or $80 a year for people who have been doing that already to be able to use their key fob to start their car remotely. Stuff like that. That's what's going on, okay? And they're calling it, quote, activating in-car features or something, which you can imagine the buzz phrase infested meeting with the ad execs who came up with this nonsense and how fun that was.
Now let's see who's really behind these bandages.
Charging money now for pre-existing features.
Well, they sure had everything figured out.
Let's just cut the euphemistic bullshit for a second and be George Carlin levels of clear here, all right? Car manufacturers are hurting because people have been buying less cars for a while now, okay? So they're coming up with new ways to generate revenue from a car sale after the car's already been purchased, leeching off their customers by restricting already built-in vehicle features so they can sell them later as an ongoing subscription, which is not about the customer at all in any way whatsoever, and is strictly about figuring out ways to generate more revenue and suck more money out of people, period. There's no other way to put that. I'm sorry. That's such a crap thing to do. And it's crappy every time they do it, okay? It's not just cars. This is happening all over the place. There's a little digital middleman, little digital control mechanism that's been placed in between the hardware doing the thing it's supposed to do, just to eke out a few more dollars from people like the greedy little gremlin creatures that they are. This kind of subscription situation is where the whole economy is eventually headed. And surprise, surprise, the pandemic accelerated this trend handily, immensely, to the tune of an additional $100 billion, okay? And here's WEF talking about the digital transformation of business and how they believe the crisis of 2020 and subsequent economic downturn will, quote, accelerate the global shift to subscription business models beyond the technology industry, end quote. And I guess they would know, wouldn't they? So I started looking into this a little further, and I came across this article off of the Stanford Graduate School of Business, centered around one of its one of its graduates who has actually built a software company to aid companies in shifting to this model of business. And he's saying this is the whole future of how they're going to start doing everything. And if they don't start shifting their businesses to these kinds of models, they won't have business left, because this is the whole future is going to be this model of subscription. And I just want to read this part of this to you. He says, once you get into the habit of thinking this way, it becomes easier. My colleagues and I, often over dinner and wine, would challenge each other to come up with businesses that couldn't be turned into a subscription model, and we tossed out ideas like guitars and cement. We realized it's not about the physical product, it's about what the customer is trying to do, and that inversion of thinking is at the root of everything. Using cement as an example, you realize that flooring is the actual need. There's a whole revolution of industrial carpets now. There's a service contract. You simply pay a monthly fee plus overages, usage, etc. You can actually subscribe to a floor. I mean, first of all, doesn't that sound like a fun dinner? Am I right? Just a bunch of Stanford MBA grads sitting around the table, having a little wine, figuring out ways that corporations can create endless revenue-generating streams out of what used to just be the products we buy. That's just so much fun, right? To figure out ways to just make even more money off the same stuff, just over time, forever. I mean, why stop there, right? Why would you even stop there? Don't stop at floors. How about you bought a fridge, and now if you actually want to keep your food cold, it's going to be a monthly fee. And I guess if you don't pay, you don't eat. How about that? How about we have kitchen cabinets? Well, what if they're computer controlled? And if you don't want your cabinet door to not open, you have to pay another fee. How about your smart toilet won't flush unless you pay every time?
Dave.
You know, it's like every corporation that's doing this has become the modern tech-driven mafia, and we're all gonna have to start paying protection money for the products we buy to actually do the things those products are supposedly manufactured to do. And if you look at the figures in terms of profit, you will quickly see a shift has been taking place while we've all been distracted, with, the pandemic and everything. It's all moving towards usership and away from ownership. And the claim is that this is being driven by younger generations, like millennials and younger, who actually prefer to not own anything. But I don't see anyone admitting that this isn't really about what people can afford, not actually what they prefer. If everything gets made more expensive and you can rent something because that's more affordable, that's what you're going to do because you can't afford to buy the thing. So if they shift everything to this model, that's what people are going to do because that's going to be the only way they can afford the things. It's not really what they prefer, it's just what they can afford. And we just keep getting told how convenient this is all going to be. But the elephant in the room is the potential weaponization of that convenience, which has already happened with a lot of this technology and its convenience over time. The erosion of our privacy, stuff like that. For anyone who follows this channel, I shouldn't even have to connect the obvious dots to explain to you all at this point how easily this kind of economy can be integrated with a CBDC and the social credit system.
The international operability of CBDCs is a huge task. The new dimension, I think, is huge, and it requires to bring all the forces together. Yeah, there are many dimensions, and a special partnership with the Federal Reserve System, special partnership. The challenge is huge, and therefore the effort behind being successful will be huge to add forces. All the forces, in particular, the concentration of central banks forces, many dimensions. Yeah, there are many dimensions.
But the potential there is like if George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World had a mutant chimera baby with every Black Mirror episode thrown in the mix for good measure. I mean, come on, all right? At the same time, though, there is a benefit to this because stuff is getting more expensive. It's made with crappier materials. So why would people want to own it if it's just an expensive piece of junk that's going to have to be replaced a lot sooner, right? I mean, you see how this all works. it all loops back around to the beginning of this video. I even took it to Twitter and I asked people if they noticed that things are getting crappier. And there were over 100 responses right away, which is pretty good for an account that someone on that platform writes me daily to tell me is shadow banned within an inch of its life. So real quick, let's just look at a few of these. A lot of people called out planned obsolescence. Danny says people have appliances from the 70s that still work, but the last new refrigerator I bought lasted only 3 years. They're talking about how the batteries and wireless tech in the headphones they buy are still fine, but the plastic is garbage. It only lasts 9 months at most. Don't get me started on shoes. Oh yeah, the shoes. I think a lot of people have noticed that shoes used to last a really long time, and now they're just falling apart in a very short amount of time. This person says, I just replaced a ceiling fan. The old one lasted 50 years. It was mind-boggling to feel the difference in the craftsmanship between the new and the old one. I don't expect the new one to last more than 10 years. They're talking about engineered lifespan, entire brands disappearing off shelves, things are designed to be obsolete. I can't find a humidifier that will last longer than 18 months for real. Barry Quint says, yes, I was weeding my yard and my battery is shot. To replace my battery costs as much as a new weed eater with a new battery. She says, wasteful, designed by corrupt companies. This person says, I was just thinking about this earlier today. It's actually worse than that. 20 years ago, things were made cheap and didn't last. Now things literally don't even do the thing they're advertised as. It's like they functionally don't even do the one thing they were designed to do. This person says a switch-on kettle I purchased a while back had a purposefully thinned linkage that was clearly designed to fail after a certain number of actuations. They had to epoxy it to get another couple years of use out of it. But yeah, it's just, stuff is just falling apart. And a lot of people have forgotten how to repair things because we've moved so forward in society into this model of not repairing things that people are losing the skills and abilities to even do so. Steady decline since 1950. I miss having things I didn't need to replace. Shrinkflation, but with quality. Walking down the toy aisle now, it's like, wow, everything is so flimsy. Circular economy. We used to have appliances that last a lifetime and then some. I mean, I have a heating pad my mom gave me that's probably from the late 70s, and it still works. It's awesome. And I will keep using it until it physically refuses to work anymore. I mean, at this point, thing's probably 50 years old. Works really well, though. Anyways. So, yes, in short, lots of people are noticing this. Over and over and over. I have lots and lots of comments. This could go on all day. And by the way, holding back products on purpose is not just a modern day problem. Okay, this has been going on for, like I said, at least a century now on record. And just like you have a group of leading international business people meeting today and discussing the purposeful shifting of the economy to this extremely pro-corporate profit model of business, back in 1924, you had a group of leading international businessmen who gathered in Geneva right before Christmas to found what came to be known as the Phoebus Cartel, the supposedly first truly global cartel that carved up the world's incandescent bulb market and purposefully engineered a shorter lifespan for light bulbs by half. Okay, so they went from 2,000 hours to 1,000 hours on some of these light bulbs. And there's a whole breakdown about this on the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers website that says, indeed, all evidence points to the cartels being motivated by profits and increased sales, not by what was best for the consumer.
The Phoebus Cartel was established in 1924 by the manufacturers in Europe and the United States of light bulbs. Together they carved out a global market cartel and significantly conspired to create shorter lifespans for the average light bulb, creating higher costs for consumers and skyrocketing profits for the manufacturers. It took less than a decade for Phoebus to lose its influence and for its planned cartel to phase out, but the act of using planned obsolescence has infiltrated across consumer markets.
Creative product lines, brilliant advertising, those mean a lot, but it takes even more. going to try an unheard of experiment. They are going to share with you in great detail their plans for the coming year.
We see it today with automobiles, computers, software updates in particular, as well as general consumer electronics, cameras, and similar technology.
That one will replace the old 110B. Plans you'll learn about in a little while for the new model 103 and 104 color pack cameras due to go on the market early next month.
The problem with suppressed technology isn't just the exotic stuff we haven't heard of or don't know if it really works or if it's fantasy. It's also things we use every day but which are held back on purpose just for reasons of profit. Planned obsolescence is an official part of marketing today's consumer electronic and mechanical devices, where they plan for the need for a new carburetor, for new spark plugs, for new belts at 75,000 miles, where they force you to install upgrades or the latest version of an operating system on a computer in order to install programs that you need to do your work or your leisure activities. Planned obsolescence is a way to make higher profits off of giving consumers less than they're capable of giving, holding out and phasing in upgrades either at a premium price or years and decades down the road. If planned obsolescence is something they do admittedly, but quietly, how much more are they not even telling us about in the true suppressed technology?
So that was a cartel that was basically forcing companies to make products with shorter lifespans on purpose. All that time ago. The idea that that's not been going on since is kind of silly. It's just kind of silly. And if you're unsure of whether or not light bulbs had been purposefully held back like that, look no further than the world's oldest light bulb that has reportedly been burning since 1901 in the Livermore Fire Department in California, which is now in its 120th year of use, and actually has a live webcam that you can go watch, which is just pointing at this light bulb that is in the ceiling of this fire department. So this is a pre-cartel light bulb, and it's still burning today. And they keep it running continuously, and it's still going. You guys, we're living in a time when in the not too distant future, we're going to be able to tell our grandchildren stories around the digital campfire because, actual campfires will have been banned and outlawed out of existence. But we'll be able to tell stories about how we used to be able to buy products that just worked without having to pay monthly fees to unlock them and make them work. I wish I was kidding, but that is what they're doing. That is where they're pushing everything. A future where people will own nothing. And I'm not sure if they're going to like it. I'm still out on that. I guess if your other option is to pay 5 times as much to own something that's still just going to be a broken piece of crap later, then maybe you will like not owning anything. Maybe it will just be better to do it that way, but I think the like it promise remains to be seen. This world is just, I feel like I get to the end of these videos and you don't see it when I don't go on camera, but I put my head in my hands when I'm talking to y'all. It's like the world is losing the last vestiges of common sense and replacing them with artificially intelligent control systems programmed by people who rely on paychecks for doing the bidding of their greedy Skeksis bosses who are just...
Do you ever have explosive diarrhea? Is it because the world is filled with too many nouns and social interactions? Studies have shown that nouns are the leading cause of sentences, and sentences can form the building blocks of communication. Everything from having to physically speak to other human beings, to making thoughts in our brains, and sometimes even diarrhea. Is there anything we can do? Now we can take our control back by constantly drinking tea all the time, forever.